Police officers of Reddit. What's the dumbest call you've ever had to respond to? Story 1. Technically, I didn't respond, but a 911 hang-up. Upon calling back, a small child answered and said there was a spider in the house. The responding officer reported over the radio, "The intruder has been neutralized." I lost it. Story 2. Domestic dispute call. We arrived to find the mother of a teenage boy, maybe 14, loud and upset. Her complaint? He's interested in girls. Oddly enough, that tends to happen around that age. Not much I could do about that one. Story 3. Not an officer, but I picked up a few stories during my police internships. Besides chasing a pig, the mystery goo was probably the dumbest call I remember. The officer I was with got called to a family issue, so I stayed in the car listening to the radio. Then, a call came through. 323, City Dispatch. Can you head to address? Caller reports a brown goo in his alley. Silence. Dispatch. 323. Brown goo? 10-4. He says it smells bad. Alright. More officers joined. By the time we got there, the entire city's police force was gathered around this foamy, rancid-smelling goo baking in the summer heat. We stood around joking until the FTO, with a smirk, said, "You know, this seems more like a fire department issue." He radioed in, and minutes later, firefighters arrived. They poked the goo, laughed, and called for an engine. Soon, a fire truck pulled into the narrow alley, lights flashing. "Why are we here?" Officer points at goo. "What is it?" "We dunno." "Goddamn, it smells bad." Yes, it does." After a moment, one firefighter said, "We could hose it down?" We all agreed. The firefighters unleashed a blast of water, sending goo and gravel flying into the homeowner's yard, coating his garage. Everyone, officers, firefighters, even the homeowner, burst into laughter. As we packed up, one officer turned to the homeowner and said, "Remember, this is the fire department's fault." That was 25 minutes of pure small-town policing at its finest. Story 4. Dispatched to a domestic violence call. My oldest son is assaulting my youngest son. We arrive on scene. Turns out the assailant is 8 and the victim is 6. The mother insists he's got to go. As in, the 8-year-old needed to go to jail for slapping his brother. Both kids ended up going to Child Protective Services. A safety plan was put in place to make sure the mother was capable of raising them. Dispatched to a theft. Someone is stealing my tomatoes off the tomato plant. Checked the backyard. Noticed the tops of hostas were also missing. Case closed. Warrant signed on Bambi, Prince of the Forest. A guy kept calling about a car blocking his driveway. Parking complaints were low priority, as we were handling car crashes, bar fights, and burglar alarms. After being told to wait, he called back. Said he'd been robbed at gunpoint while waiting for police. When we arrived, he didn't want to report, couldn't give a suspect description, but while we were there, he asked if we could tow the car blocking his driveway. We did. He didn't realize the business across the street had video surveillance. A week later, after reviewing footage, he was charged with disrupting public services. Several burglary in progress calls that turned out to be raccoons. At least they dressed the part. And of course, the classic burglary where all the suspects' belongings were packed outside in black garbage bags, with multiple eviction notices from the sheriff attached. People think if they don't show up to the eviction hearing, they can't get evicted. Story 5. Ex-cop here. Had an alcoholic walk straight into a parked vehicle, fall over, blame the driver, and demand CSI to prove it when we arrived. The driver had just started his engine to back out of his driveway. The guy, completely plastered, heard the noise and blindly followed it until he walked face first into the car. No mark on his leg, where he claimed he'd been hit. No dent on the vehicle, not even a scratch. Most importantly, the car hadn't actually moved at all. We told him to go away because, frankly, he was being an idiot. He tried kicking off at us and nearly got himself arrested. Bonus. One slow Sunday, I listened to a traffic officer give live updates on a fallen tree blocking a rural road. Yeah, I've pulled up to the tree, it's blocking the road. Still here with the tree. No cars yet. I think I see the council coming to clear it. Yeah, Scratch that, it was just a taxi. Do we know how long they'll be? I've been here forever. Yeah, they're definitely here now. This went on for hours and was absolutely hilarious. Story 6. As a cop, I get asked all the time about the most call I've ever taken: scariest, creepiest, funniest, dumbest. After 11 years on the job and 3 more as a crime scene tech, I've seen a lot. And just when you think you've seen it all, something new happens. When it comes to dumb calls, the list is extensive. A mother calling because her 6- and 8-year-old were fighting over Pokemon cards. A woman reporting feral cats in her home, which turned out to be 2 tiny kittens. A man complaining that the ducks in the pond behind his house were snoring too loudly. But last year, a new winner took the crown. It started as a disorderly conduct call in a grocery store parking lot, 2 men arguing outside their cars. Then, one of them called and reported that he was being blocked in. When I arrived, I found a Corvette and a lifted pickup truck locked in a ridiculous standoff. The truck driver had been turning right, but his vehicle was so large that he needed both lanes to make the turn. The Corvette driver, coming from the other direction, refused to back up and give him space. No collision, just 2 stubborn men refusing to budge. Here's the kicker. This had been going on for 30 minutes. At first, they sat in their cars, waiting each other out. After 10 minutes, the truck driver's wife got bored and went into the grocery store. Another 10 minutes later, both drivers got out and started arguing. Someone finally called the police. The best part? Neither one of them was actually blocked in. Either could have reversed and gone about their day. But no, this was about winning. A full-blown ego contest between 2 middle-aged men in a parking lot. After confirming no crime had been committed, I told them both they were acting like children, pointed out that even the truck driver's wife had given up, and suggested they figure out how to use reverse. Then, I turned around and laughed all the way back to my patrol car. I left and got Starbucks. To this day, I still can't wrap my head around 2 grown men wasting half an hour over a right-of-way that didn't even exist. Story 7. Obligatory, not a cop, but when I was a journalist, I covered a story about a stolen van, one that a disabled boy depended on for school, therapy, and medical appointments. A perfect local news piece. A press conference was hastily organized. I arrived along with a few colleagues, several supportive neighbors, multiple officers assigned to the case, and even the district's watch commander, likely called in as a favor. We gathered in the backyard as the mother tearfully spoke about how crucial the van was to her son's life. Then, mid-sentence, the sliding patio door behind her opened. A concerned-looking man stepped outside, exchanged a few words with her in their native language, and suddenly, her face went pale. A neighbor burst out laughing. When we turned to him, he said. He asked what was going on. She said their son's van was stolen. He said, "No, I took it to the store to get groceries and stopped at my mother's for a visit." Sure enough, the van was parked safely on the street. Turns out, the father never drove the van unless their son was with him. That day, he had taken it to fill up the gas tank, without telling his wife. At least I managed to turn it into a story about false calls to the police. Story 8. 911 operator here. Call came in as a possible domestic. Man running down the street in the middle of the night, chasing a woman, both screaming. Then a second caller reports that neither have shoes, and the man is yelling, "I can't believe this is happening to me." Not exactly the usual domestic dispute verbiage, which tends to be less poetic. But still, we send officers. Police arrive and, in the most monotone voices possible, report, "Everything is fine. Cancel the ambulance. Cancel extra units." No further details. They're clearly trying not to laugh, and only mostly succeeding. Hours later, they finally explain. The couple had woken up, stone-cold sober, spotted a dark presence on their back deck, and bolted out the door in terror. Shoeless, screaming into the night. That one made our Twitter feed. Story 9. Got a call to an upper-middle-class neighborhood for a trespassing complaint. The victim, a 50-something elementary school principal, insisted his neighbor had trespassed countless times and demanded an arrest. The perpetrator? A 3-year-old child. He was absolutely serious. He wanted me to arrest a toddler for stepping over an invisible property line while playing in the yard. I told him there was nothing criminal or civilly actionable against a 3-year-old and left. He filed a formal complaint against me for dereliction of duty. My chief and the town mayor told me to forget it. Story 10. I once responded to a disturbance at a house. My partner and I arrived to find 2 old women in the front room, already in full argument mode. No one answered the door, so we walked in. One of them, the homeowner, immediately greeted me as Peter. I told her I wasn't Peter, but she insisted, "Yes, you are, Peter. Now get this bitch out of my house." She gestured at the other woman, Alice. Alice was a short, round, drunk old lady. She started chuckling, cursing at me, and daring me to try and make her leave. Meanwhile, the homeowner kept ranting, yelling "Peter" at me over and over again. My partner, who was supposed to be training me, stood by the door, crying with laughter. Then, a noise came from upstairs. My partner seized the chance to escape, winked at me, and left me to handle the madness. I tried reasoning with Alice, figuring out that she actually lived across the street. As I worked to convince her to leave, I heard banging upstairs. Expecting a fight, I ran up, only to find my partner calmly chatting with a giant of a man. 6 feet 3 inches, built like the honey monster, thick glasses, and a heavy Scottish accent. "Hey man, fit you Dean in my house?" This was Raymond. My partner explained we were here for the women downstairs. Raymond, unfazed, said, "That pair of bitches? Nothing to do with me. I just watch police camera action all day, every day." Sure enough, the show was playing in the background. We went back downstairs, ready to remove Alice and be done with it. No, the moment we walked in, the homeowner latched onto my partner. "Peter, there you are. Get this bitch out." I pointed at my partner. "No, he's Peter." "Oh, so he is," she responded and immediately turned her shouting on him. We were just about to remove Alice when Raymond suddenly stormed in, squared up to my partner, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a bag of sweets. "Hey man, do you want a fucking humbug?" At this point, we both lost it, laughing out loud at how ridiculous this had become. Then Alice chimed in, "Raymond, I only came over here to sit on your face again." Our amusement turned to pure horror. Raymond shouted, "Oh, you dirty bitch. Fuck off," and stormed back upstairs. Then the homeowner started screaming "Peter, Peter, Peter," over and over. We'd had enough. We grabbed Alice by the arms and dragged her to the door. She was unnaturally strong for a drunk old woman, laughing and fighting us the entire way. Just as we reached the door, she stopped struggling, because her trousers had just fallen down. No underwear. Guess that made it easier for sitting on Raymond's face. There was a long pause. My partner and I locked eyes in silent horror. Then Alice cackled, leaned back, and started pissing. Full force. All over the floor, her trousers, and straight out the open front door. The homeowner screamed, started punching me in the back, not very effectively, and yelled upstairs, "Raymond, she's pissing." From the top of the stairs, Raymond's voice boomed, "Oh, you dirty bitch," all over my laminate floor. At this point, I was physically holding myself to keep from pissing with laughter. My partner was doubled over, crying. Alice, still midstream, braced herself in the doorway, refusing to be moved. Then I saw them. 2 pedestrians walking by. From their perspective, 2 cops wrestling with a fat, naked from the waist down, cackling old woman who was pissing out the door like a fire hose. I lost it. "Shut the fucking door," I yelled between fits of laughter. Eventually, Alice's flow stopped, and so did her strength. We got the door shut. After a few minutes, we convinced her to pull up her trousers and stagger across the street to her home. Her son, who definitely had heroin addict written all over him, opened the door. He took one look at us, at his mother, and at the puddle still visible in the street. He said nothing, just a silent, knowing look. As we walked away, we heard the door open behind us. In the sweetest old lady voice, Alice called out, "I love you boys," followed by maniacal laughter. Her son dragged her inside. We didn't dare look back. We got in the car, drove down the road, and pulled over. Then we laughed until we couldn't breathe. One of the most bizarre nights of my career. Story 11. I wasn't a cop, but I was an EMT for about 8 years in a city with a solid reputation for violent crime. One day, we got a call for a guy who'd been assaulted with a hammer. Turns out, a particularly rambunctious 12-year-old had thrown the hammer at him, barely clipping his toe before scampering off down an alley. My partner had just found out I could do a pretty mean Christopher Walken impression and bet me $20 I wouldn't do the entire call in his voice, including the radio traffic. I locked eyes with him, picked up the mic and answered. Medic, 14, en route. My partner lost it. I had to wait for him to step out of the cab before calling the arrival, so it didn't sound like he'd completely lost his mind. 14 to dispatch, we're here. At the scene. Dispatch, clearly confused. Yeah, on scene at 1837. I gave my partner a minute to compose himself before heading inside. Once he was ready, we went in. Now, the patient had no reason to call an ambulance. No marks, no bruising, no bleeding, no swelling. He even said his toe didn't hurt. But here we were. So I had no problem going full walking on him. So, I hear, your toe hurts. Got hit with a hammer. A miscreant, no doubt. Threw it at your foot, bang. Right on the pinky toe. It's a shame. My partner immediately buried his face in the med bag, pretending to look for something. The patient noticed something was off, glancing between my partner, who was visibly struggling to keep it together, and me, completely deadpan. They'll catch him. I'm sure. This degenerate. Soon. In the meantime, my man, what do we do? About your toe? Surely, surgery is unlikely. Patient now unsure. I don't know, man. You said surgery? You think they gonna cut on it? My partner sounded like he was dry heaving into the bag at this point, refusing to make eye contact. The patient, now fully confused, looked back at me. You misunderstand, my good man. You see, I don't think it's an option for you. There's nothing to be done. No bruise. No marks. No broken bones. There's no need for medical attention, as it were. You're fine. Patient, yeah, man, that's cool. I just check in to see, better safe than sorry. I get it, I do. But I think you'll be okay here at home. An ice pack might help if you want, but you don't have to. Patient, yeah, I did. I just get some ice on it. He signed a refusal, and we headed back to the rig. My partner, wiping tears from his eyes, red in the face, still chuckling, managed to say between gasps, "That's the best $20 I ever spent." I picked up the mic. Dispatch, 14. Patient, refused transport. We're in service. My partner completely lost it, laughing loud enough that dispatch definitely heard. Dispatch didn't understand what was going on, but our supervisor did. 14. Meet me at your quarters. Oh shit. When we arrived, he was already waiting. I stepped out of the rig, looking guilty as hell. My partner didn't even try. He stayed in the truck, still dying. Oh hey, Super's name? What's up? He stared at me through the driver's side window with the look, somewhere between amusement and vague disappointment. Supervisor, don't do that anymore. And tell that idiot to step out of the truck if he can't keep from laughing. Then, without another word, he drove off. And that was the first and last ride of Christopher Walken, EMT. Story 12. Some cop out there is probably thinking, yep, my worst calls were from this person's landlord. My landlord called the police all the time over the dumbest shit imaginable. I left my straightener on once. It shut off automatically. But she still called the cops, claiming there was a potential fire in my apartment. If there was garbage in the parking lot, she'd call the police, embellishing it into some dramatic story. My ex-boyfriend is stalking me. He left garbage outside. The cops would arrive and go, "Ma'am, you called about a bag of trash?" She only knew all this because she was entering our apartment while we were at work. Every time, the cops would explain that she couldn't just enter our units. And every time, she argued, "But it's my unit. I own it. They're young. How do I know they won't burn the place down? I'm just making inspections." One cop finally snapped and told her, "Ma'am, I don't think you have ever been stable. Then there was the time a visitor parked in the handicapped spot outside. Her actual handicapped tenant had a permit, but when she saw another car parked there with a different permit, she, of course, called the police. One day, she started locking all the tenants out and then called the cops on us. The officer basically told her to fuck off. When I finally had enough, I told her I was breaking my lease and demanded my deposit back. I had a camera in my room and caught her going through my things. I left work, went straight to the police station, and told them everything. They knew exactly who she was. A cop had to personally escort me to move my stuff out. That's how bad she was. Some cop out there is probably thinking, yep, my worst calls were from this person's landlord. My landlord called the police all the time over the dumbest shit imaginable. I left my straightener on once. It shut off automatically, but she still called the cops, claiming there was a potential fire in my apartment. If there was garbage in the parking lot, she'd call the police, embellishing it into some dramatic story. My ex-boyfriend is stalking me. He left garbage outside. The cops would arrive and go, "Ma'am, you called about a bag of trash?" She only knew all this because she was entering our apartment while we were at work. Every time, the cops would explain that she couldn't just enter our units. And every time, she argued, "But it's my unit. I own it. They're young. How do I know they won't burn the place down? I'm just making inspections." One cop finally snapped and told her, "Ma'am, I don't think you have ever been stable." Then there was the time a visitor parked in the handicapped spot outside. Her actual handicapped tenant had a permit, but when she saw another car parked there with a different permit, she, of course, called the police. One day, she started locking all the tenants out and then called the cops on us. The officer basically told her to fuck off. When I finally had enough, I told her I was breaking my lease and demanded my deposit back. I had a camera in my room and caught her going through my things. I left work, went straight to the police station, and told them everything. They knew exactly who she was. A cop had to personally escort me to move my stuff out. That's how bad she was. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.